Hi, my name is Joy Downing Riley, and my family and I have been attending this church for about the past 3 years. We came over from Community Presbyterian Church, where we'd been longtime members. I gave up trying to organize my thoughts about 8:30 last night, so I'm pretty interested in what I'm going to say. Of course, Rich is a teacher, and he had his notes well planned, but that kind of fits my testimony. I want to segue a little bit off of Jeff's sermon last Sunday. He talked a lot about the supernatural love of God that was represented in the love of God coming to earth, and also by Joseph and Mary and their faith in accepting Jesus as their child. And that fits my testimony because God has acted so supernaturally in my life. It's kind of hard to testify to because I'm really not normal, especially for a Presbyterian. So really, when I was born, that's when the supernatural of God really seemed to enter into my life. Both my parents are international evangelists and very gifted Christian leaders, so I grew up into a ministry family. I have 5 older brothers and an older sister. However, my mom was 44 when I was born, and my dad was 47. They'd had their family. I was very late and quite unexpected. My dad actually was in Europe on a ministry tour when I was born, and my mom was left to have me basically by herself. She got up a really cold December morning, called a friend to take her to the hospital, got dropped off, and had the baby, me, by herself. And my parents had decided before they had left that my name would be Rebecca Ann, but my mom, in her true form, decided to do a switcheroo because she felt like the Lord had spoken to her. And so she spoke this verse over my life. For God's anger is but for a moment. His favor is for life. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. And so henceforth my name became Joy, to my dad's surprise when he returned. So anyway, my mom spoke of this verse my whole life, and I always got caught up in the weeping part. What was that about? And I learned very early that God had called both my parents into ministry, and it always felt like they loved God more than me. They traveled frequently. When I was 2, they went to Europe to do a ministry trip, and when they returned, I didn't recognize them. To me, they were strangers. As they learned as an adult, babies at that age are developing memory. They can remember when parents leave, but they don't necessarily remember that they come back. So that was sort of the pattern that got established in my life, and I ended up feeling really defective. What furthered that was, as Rich mentioned, my great fear of evangelism, and here my parents were very gifted. I'd seen my parents lead people to the Lord in the grocery store, the Jehovah's Witnesses that came to the door, you know, those kinds of people. And as I grew, the Lord just began to really speak to me. I grew up in Colorado Springs below the Rocky Mountains, and the majesty and the extravagance and the beauty of God just spoke to me. And I tried to speak to my parents about this, and it was like, yeah, that's good, but, you know, they're Bible-based. Let's stick to the Word of God. So when I was 8 years old, my parents traveled to South America. They took me with them, and we were in Sao Paulo, one of the largest cities in the world, one of the busiest street cities in terms of masses of people moving up and down the streets. I wasn't really prepared, and my dad was very stressed out trying to get me through these people traffics. And one day, this beggar followed us literally for about, I think, 8 blocks as we were trying to get to our hotel, just asking for money. And there was something about this beggar man that just captured me. He had these soulful blue eyes, and he just was very persistent, very quiet and gently following us and following us. And I asked my dad, can't you just give him a little money? He's like, no, we can't help everybody. And as a parent, I really understood. He started to pull me out of a stressful, dangerous situation. When we got back to the hotel room, I cried and I cried and I cried because I felt like there was something different about this guy. And I didn't know what it was, but it's like, we needed to help that guy. And I questioned my parents. I'm like, what's wrong with you people? Haven't you read the story of the Good Samaritan? It's like, you're not supposed to help everybody, just that one guy in front of us. And they were really dumbfounded, and I wept literally for 3 days in the hotel. And later I learned, this is the weeping part of my story, this was my call, that God had called me to pray, to intercede, to advocate for the poor on his behalf. And it kind of makes you a little strange, because I cry at funny things. And my mom, especially in ministry, I'd have to go to her during speaking tours, and there'd be a point in her preaching where I'd hear her tell a story about a brokenhearted person, and I'd just start weeping uncontrollably, and like, oh, get this kid out of here. But anyway, God grew that in me. And by the time I got to college, sort of the sense of abandonment that I experienced in my family and from my parents, the confusion of it had come to the point where they were, again, in Europe. They had moved their entire ministry over there. I was in college. I saw them twice when I was in college. And I just felt like I had come to the end. I was in so much emotional pain. And at that point, some of my professors had wanted me to get some more training at a writing conference. They were encouraging me to pursue writing as a profession. I wasn't sure about that. So I went to a conference, met with professional writers. And that evening, a poet had given this beautiful poetry reading, and it was so stimulating to me, I just couldn't sleep. So I walked on the beach almost all night. As the sun came up, I was on the beach of the islands at Fort Worden, Washington. And I was walking along, and there was a cliff, and above it, somebody had written, "Jesus is Lord." And I kept walking. I thought, oh, that's so weird. And, you know, when I was growing up in the 70s, people at baseball games and things on television would hold up John 3:16. You remember that? And I always thought, that's so silly. That Bible verse isn't magic. I never thought anybody that wasn't a Christian was going to pick up their Bible and go, John 3:16, and that would speak to them. I don't really know what God was doing with that, but I always thought that was dumb. So I'm thinking it was the John 3:16 people that put this up on the cliff. So I'm walking along, and I realized later, wait a minute, how would you logistically do that? You would have had to carve into the cliff, you would have reached over, tear across the bushes, and it started to occur to me this isn't humanly possible. So I ran back, and as I looked up at the cliff, the letters were gone, and I realized, oh, that was the Lord. And it has spoken so deeply to me for the rest of my life, because that's when Jesus saved me, because I was in such desperation and despair, and he revealed himself to me so supernaturally. And I know a lot of people would like billboards like that, but I have the privilege of telling you about that. It happens. And after that experience, the waves of God's love just enveloped me, and he saved me. He saved my life. So when I was 19, I consider that's when I was saved. And I've had many more experiences I could share with you, but I don't have time, about God's love that I experienced in the supernatural. I don't know why it's me. I would like to say I'm so cool, but my family will disavow you of that. So anyway, I would just like to testify to God's supernatural love, as Jeff did last week, and in the spirit of Revelation 19:10, Apostle John tells us that the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy.